In our meditation yesterday morning, we started by asking ourselves the question, what is it that knows or is aware of my experience? And we saw that whatever it is that knows or is aware of experience is what we call I. I am aware of thoughts and images, but I'm not myself a thought or an image. I am aware of feelings and sensations, but I'm not myself a feeling or a sensation. I am aware of perceptions, that is, sights, sounds, tastes, textures, and smells. But I'm not myself a perception. I am that which is aware of all objective experience, but I'm not myself anything that can be experienced objectively. I am the subjective experience of being aware or knowing, independent of whatever I am aware of or know. As such, I am the impartial witness of all experience. And the image I suggested was that of a person standing on a platform watching the trains pass through the station. It's a rather simplistic image that has relatively little explanatory power, but nevertheless it gives a visual image of the independent nature or transcendent aspect of awareness. The person standing on the platform witnessing the trains pass by is not affected in any way by the number of the trains, the types of the train, whatever is taking place within the train, wherever the train is coming from or destined for. The person watching the trains is completely independent of the characteristics or qualities or destinies of each of the trains. Likewise, the witnessing presence of awareness is completely independent of the content of our thoughts, feelings, sensations, or perceptions. The awareness with which the thought 2 plus 2 is known is exactly the same awareness. The awareness with which the thought 2 plus 2 equals 4 is known is exactly the same awareness with which the thought 2 plus 2 equals 5 is known. In other words, the content of our thoughts, whether they are true or false, right or wrong, kind or unkind, reasonable or unreasonable, makes no difference to the one that knows them. Likewise, our feelings, our darkest feelings and our happiest moments are known alike by the same awareness, the same knowing I. Just as the person standing on the platform is present prior to the appearance of the train, during the existence of the train, and after the train has passed through the station, so the witnessing presence of awareness is present prior to all thoughts and feelings, during the existence of all thoughts and feelings, and after all thoughts and feelings have disappeared. And just as the person standing on the platform is in exactly the same condition before the train has passed through the station and after the train has passed through the station, so the witnessing presence of awareness always remains in exactly the same condition, irrespective of the content or quality of our thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. It is, as such, said to be transcendent, independent, unaffected. The witnessing presence of awareness is completely impartial. Like the sun, it shines on all experience equally. Although all judgments appear to it, it is inherently free of all judgment. It cannot distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad. That is not to imply that thoughts about what is right or wrong, good or bad, are not appropriate or relevant. It is just to say that ideas of good and bad and right or wrong are not inherent in awareness itself. As such, awareness is said to be colorless, free of all objective content, free of all form or limitation. In most people's experience, I, awareness, has become mixed up with the qualities and limitations of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, and seems as a result to have acquired their limits. So the first step is to disentangle or extricate awareness from its content, from objective experience. It is a path of discrimination, a separating out of awareness from everything it is aware of. And as awareness is relieved or divested of all the qualities with which it seems to have been mixed, it begins to shine more and more clearly as it is. In some cases, this revelation of the nature of awareness happens unsolicited in a single moment. And we've all read or heard of such stories. But in most cases, this revelation of the nature of awareness takes place gradually or as a series of revelations. The word revelation comes from the Latin revelare, meaning to lay bare. So there is this laying bare of awareness. It's this exposure of the essential nature of awareness. That is the essential nature of ourself. Naked, open, empty, pristine, luminous. Always in the same condition. Never aging, never appearing or disappearing. In other words, without birth or death. Imperturbable, and thus peace itself. Never aggrandized or diminished by any experience, and thus fulfillment or happiness itself. The beauty of this direct approach is that we don't have to spend years practicing or making tremendous efforts to become this pristine, luminous, open, empty awareness. We simply have to look at ourselves as we currently are. And in this looking, in this clear seeing, the nature of ourself is revealed, becomes clear. We don't become open, empty awareness. We simply notice that that is what we always and already are. The only reason we failed to notice it before is because through the force of our conditioning, we allowed ourselves to be mixed up with the qualities of our thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. Everybody, irrespective of the content of their thoughts and feelings and the quality of their subsequent activities and relationships, is essentially this same pristine, luminous, open, empty, loving awareness. All that is necessary is to recognize this. And all that is necessary in order to recognize it is to look at oneself. To go to, as it were, that which we call I, myself. In fact, we cannot, it doesn't even require going to ourself, because we are already standing at and as ourself. There is no distance from ourself to ourself. So there is no room or need for any effort or path. If I were to ask you now, relatively speaking, to stand up and take a step towards yourself, where would you go? So this is truly an effortless path, a pathless path. When we walk into a dark room, to begin with, we don't see anything. There's nothing we can do to see the objects in the room. All we can do is wait. And in this waiting, we become acclimatized to the darkness, and objects begin to emerge without our doing anything. It's the same thing here. We rest the mind in its source and essence of awareness. And in this self-resting, this self-dwelling, this self-abidance, the nature of awareness is gradually, in most cases, revealed. It is an uncovering of awareness, a recognizing or a recognizing, a knowing again of something that we have always known but lost sight of due to our fascination with the content of objective experience. A remembering of ourself, not a remembering of something from the past, but of something that is always present in our experience, but seemingly obscured by the clamor of objective experience. So this revelation of the essential nature of awareness is the culmination of the inward-facing path. And having established the presence, the primacy, and the nature of awareness, it is then necessary to revisit the objects of experience from which we initially separated ourselves. So in the outward-facing path, we begin to explore and in time collapse the distance or the distinction between awareness and its objects, between the knower and the known, between self and other. So in this second stage, we embark on this outward-facing path. So notice first of all that anything that appears must appear in something or on something. Just explore that statement. Would it be possible, for instance, to have an email without a screen? Or the words of a novel without a white page? Or a cloud without a sky? So, our thoughts appear and disappear. They must therefore appear and disappear on something or in something. What are your thoughts appearing in? And don't say, I don't know. If we are reading an email, we are by definition experiencing the screen on which it appears. Would it be possible to read an email without seeing the screen? Would it be possible to see the clouds without experiencing the sky? Would it be possible to read a book without seeing the page? We may not notice that we are seeing the screen, the sky, or the page, but nevertheless we are experiencing it. We cannot say, I don't see the screen, or I don't know the screen when we are reading an email. So ask yourself the question, in what do my thoughts appear? If you are experiencing your thoughts, and I presume we are all experiencing thoughts, we are by definition experiencing whatever it is they appear within. What is that? Take whatever feelings are present, if indeed there are any feelings present. And it doesn't matter what the feelings are. You may be bored, you may be irritated, you may be sad. It doesn't matter. Don't touch the feelings. But don't be interested in them either. We are interested in that in which they appear. Our feelings appear and disappear. They must appear and disappear in something. And if we are experiencing our feelings, we are by definition experiencing whatever it is they appear within. What is that? Going back to our analogy of the email, the novel, or the clouds, notice that whatever it is the email appears in is essentially free of emails. Whatever it is that the words, the page that the words appear on, is inherently free of words. The sky, inherently free of clouds. So whatever it is that our thoughts and feelings appear in is itself inherently free of thoughts and feelings. Thoughts and feelings are not essential to it. Just as the screen, the page, and the sky are, relatively speaking, empty, inherently empty, so whatever it is in which our thoughts and feelings appear is itself inherently empty, empty of objective content. It could as such be likened to an empty space. Not an empty, inert space, but an empty knowing space, or an empty aware space. See that your thoughts and feelings are floating through this space. Thoughts pass through this space a little quicker than feelings, so we could liken our thoughts to birds that fly swiftly through the sky, whereas our feelings are slower. They're more like clouds that pass slowly through the sky. But in both cases, the birds and the clouds pass through the sky. Likewise, our thoughts and feelings pass through this open, empty, aware space. Now, what I have just said is not very different from the conventional point of view in which our thoughts and feelings are considered to appear in ourself or in our mind. However, notice that your sensations, by your sensations I mean your bodily sensation, the tingling behind your eyes, the temperature of the air on your skin, the feeling of your feet on the floor or your hands on your lap, the pain in your back or your leg. These sensations are also coming and going. What are they coming and going within? If we are experiencing sensations, and we are all experiencing sensations more or less intense, we are by definition experiencing whatever it is they appear in. What is that? Don't say, my body, because your experience of your body is itself a sensation. Or a series of sensations. What is that series of sensations appearing in? You have to be totally innocent to ask yourself this question. entertain a line of sophisticated reasoning. Just be simple, straightforward, innocent. Imagine that you know nothing, and that you are experiencing the current sensation for the very first time. Like a newborn infant would experience a sensation. What is that sensation appearing in? Don't refer to your memory, your conditioning, refer to your current experience. Allow the sensation behind your eyes to come to your attention. And now allow the current thought to come to your attention. Doesn't matter what the content of the thought is. And now with your attention, just go back and forth between the sensation, that is the tingling behind your eyes, and the current thought. Ask yourself the question, through what medium is my attention traveling as it goes from the sensation to the thought? See that your attention is traveling through this empty, knowing space. Ask yourself the question, does the sensation, the tingling behind my eyes, appear in the same space as my thoughts? Or do they appear in two different spaces? When you travel with your attention from the sensation to the thought, do you leave one field, cross a border, and enter another field in order to come in contact with the thought? Or is your attention always moving in the same field? Listen to whatever sounds are present, the sound of my voice or whatever other sounds are taking place. Those sounds are appearing and disappearing. They must be appearing and disappearing in something. And if we are experiencing the sounds, we are by definition experiencing the medium in which they appear. What is that? Go with your attention from the sensation to a thought, from a thought to a sound, and from a sound back to a sensation. Ask yourself the question, is my attention always moving in the same field? Or is there one field in which our thoughts appear, another field in which our sensations appear, and a third field in which our perceptions appear? See that your attention is always traveling in the same borderless field. Now, open your eyes for a minute, those of you with your eyes closed. A perception appears, a perception that we call the room or the world. That perception has just appeared. Close your eyes. That perception has disappeared. Open your eyes again. That perception must have appeared in something. And if we are experiencing the perception of this room or world, we are by definition experiencing whatever it is the perception appears in. What is that? In what does the current perception appear? Don't say space. Space is itself a perception. The experience of space appears and disappears. What does the experience of space appear in? Does it appear in the same medium that your thoughts, feelings, and sensations appear in? Or does it appear in a different field? Just travel backwards and forwards now with your attention from the current thought to the current perception. Does not your attention always remain in the same field? So this is where the non-dual teaching takes a radical departure from conventional thought. If we stay very close to experience, we see that all experience, that is our thoughts, images, feelings, the sensations that we know as the body, perceptions which we know as the world, all take place in the same open, empty, aware space or field. In other words, all experience takes place in awareness. That is not some extraordinary experience that I have, or that none of you are having, or that some people have privileged access to. It is in fact everybody's experience. Can anybody now find an experience that is taking place outside the field of awareness or consciousness? Look back over your past life. Have you ever had an experience that took place outside the field of awareness or consciousness? Think of some of your more exotic, extraordinary experiences. The LSD trips for the over 60s. The ecstasy trips for the under 30s. The near-death experiences that some of us may have had. Extraordinary visions or states of mind that some of us may have attained in exotic meditation classes. Kundalini experiences, kriyas, visions. The depths of despair that some of us may have felt, sorrow, loss. Did any of it take place outside awareness? If none of us have ever had or could ever have an experience outside awareness or consciousness, how do we know there is such a place outside consciousness? Remember, our world culture is predicated on the belief that consciousness is a byproduct of brain activity, neural activity. Although nobody has ever found consciousness in the brain, most scientists believe that sooner or later it will be located. In other words, from the conventional point of view, consciousness is this fragile, fleeting phenomenon that exists inside the brain. And everything else exists outside consciousness. Strangely, none of the people that believe this idea, which is well over 7 billion people, have ever found anything outside consciousness. But this fact is not enough to dissuade most people that there isn't anything outside consciousness. See if you can go now with your attention to the edge of the space of awareness or consciousness in which all experience appears. Is there anybody here that at some stage in their childhood did not lie awake in bed wondering how far physical space went on? Do you remember traveling with your imagination? Seeing how far space went and wondering what was beyond space? In other words, what was beyond the container in which our experience apparently appeared. So do the same thing now. Venture with your imagination to the edge of the space of awareness in which your experience appears. See if you can find that edge. The place where the field of awareness in which your experience appears ends. Any edge or border to the field of awareness that we come across would itself be an appearance within awareness. When I say, see if you can find an edge to the field of awareness, you are not one thing and awareness another. Only awareness is aware. Therefore, only awareness knows anything about itself. So really we are asking awareness itself the question, do you ever find a limit within yourself? Do you ever come to the edge of yourself? See in this way that in awareness's own experience of itself, and awareness is the only one that knows anything about itself, it is without limits or unlimited or infinite, not finite. To recognize the infinite nature of awareness is not to have some extraordinary mystical experience. It is just to see clearly in this moment the essential nature of our own mind. It is not an extraordinary experience. It is just awareness's natural experience of itself, free of any of the limits that thought and feeling superimpose upon it. Ask yourself the question, have I, awareness, ever had the experience of myself beginning? Don't think about this or reason it out with yourself. Just go to your experience of yourself, you awareness. What is your experience of yourself? Have you ever had the experience of the beginning of yourself, or the ending of yourself? In order to experience the beginning or the ending of yourself, you, awareness, would have to experience the absence of yourself. Have you, awareness, ever had the experience of your own absence? In other words, can you say, I am aware that I am not aware? Of course not. Thought believes that awareness starts and stops. Why? Because thought believes that awareness is identical to the body. The body is something that appears and disappears, and therefore whatever is identical with it must also appear and disappear with it. And for this simple reason, our culture believes that awareness starts when the body appears and ends when the body disappears. It's like believing that your computer screen begins every time you receive an email and ends every time you trash it. If the screen was identical to the email, that would be true. See that in your own experience of yourself, that is, in awareness's experience of itself, it is ever present. It has no knowledge of its own appearance or disappearance, its own birth or death. In other words, in your own experience of yourself, you, awareness, are ever present or eternal. In other words, in awareness's own experience of itself, it is ever present and without limits, or eternal and infinite. Now, from the materialistic point of view, that is, from the point of view that believes that matter was here first and at some late hour gave rise to consciousness, the knowledge that awareness is eternal and infinite is extraordinary knowledge. There is nothing extraordinary about it. What is really extraordinary is the belief that awareness is temporary and finite. For people that used to believe the earth was flat, the knowledge that it is round was extraordinary. For those of us that understand the earth is round, the belief that it is flat is extraordinary. So make it your new norm. This understanding, this feeling understanding, that all experience doesn't just appear to the witnessing presence of awareness, but appears in eternal, infinite awareness. See that time and space are not the containers of your experience. Consciousness is the container of experience. Don't just understand that, feel that. Notice again that we haven't touched our experience. We haven't manipulated experience in any way. We haven't tried to still the mind or exchange our unpleasant sensations for pleasant ones, or uncomfortable feelings for more positive ones. All we are doing is contemplating experience as it already is. Now ask yourself the question, how many unlimited awarenesses can there be? Are there 7 billion unlimited awarenesses, or 7 trillion if we include all the animals? If there were even 2 awarenesses, then each of those awarenesses would have to have a limit. The first awareness would have to stop at the place where the second awareness started. But no one has ever or could ever experience a limit to awareness. In other words, awareness never has any experience of a limitation within itself. Could it be that each of our minds appear in the same field of awareness? When I use the word mind in this context, I don't just mean thoughts and images. I mean the entire content of our objective experience, thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, sights, sounds, tastes, textures. So I mean mind in the broadest sense of the term. Just as under the materialist perspective, we all believe that each of our bodies appears in the same indivisible, limitless physical space. Could it be that each of our minds appears in the same indivisible, limitless, infinite consciousness? In other words, just as, relatively speaking, under the materialist paradigm, each of our bodies are made out of the same stuff, matter. Just as each of our bodies have a common origin, a common source. Could it be that each of our minds are made out of the same stuff? They have a common origin, a common source. Could it be that each of our minds are precipitated within the same infinite field of consciousness? And would that not account for the experience of love? That is, the experience that at the deepest level we are all one. Doesn't it begin to make sense? Two and a half thousand years ago, almost everyone believed the earth was flat. Slowly people began to question this and to make very careful observations of experience. The first people that suggested the earth was round were ridiculed. So contrary it seemed to common sense. But as Einstein said, common sense is simply a series of prejudices that most people acquire by the age of 18. Likewise, 600 years or so ago, most people believed that the sun traveled around the earth. Such was the evidence of common sense. But then people began to make careful observations of experience and realized that common sense is deceptive. In other words, the common senses cannot be relied upon for knowledge of reality. And sure enough, it turned out that the sun doesn't travel around the earth. Up until now, our world culture has believed that the universe is made out of stuff called matter, existing in time and space, and that mind or consciousness is derived at some very late hour from matter. That's what common sense suggests. But if we make a careful observation of experience, we get a very different picture. So we've seen that all experience appears not just to consciousness, but in consciousness. So one question remains. What is experience made of? What is the stuff that appears in consciousness made of? It must be made of something. What is your experience made of? If we are reading an email, we are by definition seeing the stuff it is made of. If we are reading a novel, we are experiencing the stuff the novel is made of. If we are experiencing thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, we are by definition experiencing their reality. That is, the stuff they are made of. What is that? What is your experience made of? When I say your experience, I mean your thoughts, your body, the chair, this room, your feelings, your friends. What are they made of? If we are experiencing them, and each of us is experiencing them, we must be experiencing the stuff they are made of. What is that? Start with your thoughts. Thoughts are not nothing, they are something. They must be made of something. Touch your thoughts now. Reach out your hand, your imaginary hand. Touch your thoughts. There is something there. A thought is not nothing. What is it? What is the stuff it is made of? Ask the question a different way round. Is there anything to your thoughts other than the knowing of them? Is there any substance to your thought other than knowing or experiencing? And what about your feelings, emotions? Is there anything present in an emotion other than the knowing or the experiencing of it. And what about your sensations, the sensation of your hand on your chair or your foot on the floor? Is there anything to that sensation other than the knowing or the experiencing of it? And what about the sight of this room or the sound of this voice? Is there anything there other than the knowing of it? And is the knowing out of which your thoughts are made different from the knowing out of which your perceptions are made? Or is all experience made out of the same knowing, the same consciousness? When we hear in the traditional teachings the world is an illusion, what they mean is the world as it is conceived by conventional thought, as a multiplicity and diversity of objects and selves made out of dead inert stuff called matter. Such a world is an illusion. It's not there. Contemporary science confirms this. But there is a reality to all illusions. The mirage in the desert is an illusion as water, but its reality, relatively speaking, is light. The landscape in the movie is an illusion as a landscape, but relatively speaking, it is real as a screen. So the world made out of matter, our bodies made out of matter, are illusions. As objects. But all illusions have a reality to them. Experience is real. All experience is real. Has anyone here ever had an experience that was not real? As Huang Po said, people ignore the reality of the illusory world. The reality of our experience is consciousness, pure knowing. Consciousness is the only substance that is ever experienced. And it is consciousness that is experiencing it. Matter is an abstraction of thought. That's why physicists have never found it. Each of our minds are precipitated in the same field of infinite awareness. Each of our minds don't just appear to awareness. They don't just appear in awareness. They are made of awareness or consciousness. Consciousness or pure knowing is the only substance present in experience. In other words, the world is a virtual reality, appearing in consciousness, known by consciousness, made of consciousness. When I was 6 years old, my mother tells me that I said to her, I feel that each of our lives is like a dream in God's mind. It's taken me almost exactly 50 years later to come to the same conclusion. I was given that intuition as an innocent, naive 6-year-old. But then the vision or the intuition disappeared and I had to find my own way back to it, which took me on a great adventure. But I've come to the same conclusion, that each of our minds are like a dream in God's infinite mind. And just as our night dreams appear in and are made of our own indivisible mind, so each of our minds appears in God's infinite, indivisible mind. Just as the objects and people that we dream of at night seem to be separate from the point of view of the person in the dream, from whose perspective they are known. So the objects and people that we encounter in our lives seem to be separate from the point of view of our own body, the apparently separate subject of experience, through whom the objects and others seem to be known. But just as there are no real objects and others in our night dream, so there are no real objects and others in the waking state. In other words, there are no things. There are no objects. There are no separate selves. There is just one intimate, indivisible, infinite reality. Appearing to itself as a multiplicity and diversity of separate objects and selves, but never actually becoming anything other than itself, never ceasing to be or to know its own intimate, indivisible, infinite self. This is why the Sufi Balayani said, whosoever knows their self knows their Lord. Whosoever knows the essential nature of their own mind knows the ultimate reality of the universe. when I say each of our minds are precipitated in the same field of infinite consciousness, I don't mean to suggest that our minds are things in themselves, that there are real entities called individual minds. Mind is the activity of consciousness. Just as the movie is the activity of the screen, there is no real thing called a movie. What we call a movie is simply an activity of the screen. The screen is the only entity, if we can call it an entity, that is there. Each of our minds. There is no such thing called a mind. There are no minds. Not only is there not a body and a world, as they are normally conceived, there is not even a mind. There are no individual minds. Each of our minds are like thoughts in the mind of God. But nobody has ever found a thing called a thought. Nobody has ever plucked a thought out of the mind. There is no such thing called a thought. A thought is just the activity of our mind. Likewise, each of our minds is the activity of consciousness. So there are no real finite things. So we cannot even say that consciousness is infinite. To say that consciousness is infinite, to say that it is to say that it is not finite. But if there are no finite things, we cannot use the word finite to compare consciousness. There is nothing finite in existence, so it makes no sense to say consciousness is not finite. When we say consciousness is infinite, it is just a concession to the belief in finite things. It is a thorn that is used to remove a thorn. There are no finite things, and therefore we cannot say consciousness is infinite. When we say consciousness is indivisible, we imply that there are separate things, all divided up from one another. But once we realize that there are no separate, discrete objects or entities, we can no longer even say consciousness is indivisible. The word indivisible has no meaning. We cannot say that consciousness is pure consciousness, because there is nothing in consciousness other than itself, which could make it impure or stain it or sully it. So this is why it is said that consciousness is truly without any attribute. Even to say that it is eternal, infinite, pristine, luminous is to say too much. This is all these words are borrowed from the language of duality. They all make a concession to the reality of separate, independently existing objects. They are valid words from that point of view, but at a certain stage we have to abandon even all these descriptions. They are all predicated on the belief in separate things. We cannot even call reality consciousness, because even the word consciousness implies the object that we are conscious of. And this is why it is said that reality is truly indescribable. That's why Ramana Maharshi said, silence is the highest teaching. And on that note, I should stop speaking.